Talk about some moments in history where the battle was we could look at it and say that is the laying the groundwork for the coming of the Antichrist in real historical terms.
Sure. So there have been many major forerunners of the Antichrist in terms of both leaders, individuals, and movements. One example would be Nero. So to be Catholic is to be eschatological, and even the early Christians thought that they were living in the end times, that within their lifetimes Christ would come again. And so they were constantly looking for these candidates for Antichrist. Nero obviously was an example of explicit persecution of the church, very in the open, absolute oppression, zero tolerance policy for the truth of Christianity. And not only was that, obvious that he was Antichrist in the most basic sense, being against Christ, but also he committed suicide. And at the time of his death, there were theories that Nero had faked his death so that he would perhaps be held in retainer and then fake a resurrection to claim to be the Christ, and that would mean he was the Antichrist himself, the man himself. But years went by and that did not happen. And so we can safely say he was not the Antichrist, but he certainly was doing his work and serving his agenda and is a type or a forerunner. Another obvious example is the Protestant Reformation, the attack on dogma and doctrine and the peeling away of thousands and now millions of souls from the truth. The pollution of truth with error. We're told if there's even one drop of poison introduced to truth, that it corrupts the entire thing. And so you see, it's horrific to see people who are living good lives and working and believing that they now, the fruits of Protestantism, are in union with Jesus, and because of the evil and the heresy introduced at the Reformation, they are not members of the church. And so this fracture that occurred attacks the unity of the church and sends souls to hell. Also, the Great Schism can be considered another one of these moments. So anytime where a great attack on not only the truth, whole and inviolate, but on the unity of believers can be considered the work of Antichrist. Moving forward, Father Michelli identifies several movements and errors in his 20th century alone that he thinks are major harbingers of the Antichrist, that ever before were all coalescing at this time. So before that, he ties these all to their origins in the French Revolution, as we've examined, and then also in the development of Freemasonry from that point forward. Freemasons have been around for a while, but from the 18th century onward, the work of Freemasons to subvert the church, these are all tied together, and they culminate with the heresy of modernism, which St. Pius X declared to be the synthesis of all heresies. So modernism is predicated on these principles of immanence and the religious sense. So it's subjectivist. It decentralizes God. We know that God has rights, men have duties, but modernism instead prejudices the religious experience of the individual, and this is very relativistic. You'll hear things like, oh, if this feeds your faith, go ahead and do it, but maybe not someone else. And its central error is what's called religious indifferentism. So the idea that all religions are a path to sanctity. You can perhaps get to heaven in each of them. Nobody has the full revelation of truth, which is a direct contradiction of Big R revelation. It's a denial, it's a rejection of what Christ said, is that I am the way, the truth, and the life. And essentially this harkens back to the earlier heresy of Gnosticism, which believed that there was some primordial truth that superseded all religions, and that each of us were just reaching up and grasping parts of it and only had partial truths. No, that's not what the church teaches. The church teaches that it is the deposit of faith.